Hey there, this is Conflict Tales. Buckle up because today's story is packed with drama, conflict, and shocking turns. The cops were knocking on my door again, and I already knew why. It was the fourth time this week, and the pattern had become disturbingly predictable. Every time I ignored their bogus complaints, they escalated. Today, they probably had something new up their sleeve. I opened the door to see Officer Lacey, arms crossed, lips pursed, the same look she gave me every time. "Mr. Grayson," she said, flipping through her notebook. "We received another complaint from the Homeowner Association regarding unauthorized residency on their land." I sighed. This is my land. I bought it directly from the county. "That's not what their records show," she said flatly. "According to the Homeowner Association, this parcel falls under their jurisdiction." I stepped aside, gesturing towards the stack of paperwork on my kitchen table. "Everything is legal. The sale was processed, the deed was filed, and I have tax records to prove it. I don't belong to any homeowner association. They don't have jurisdiction over me." She sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "I don't want to be here any more than you want me to be, but they keep filing complaints. Trespassing, illegal structures, violation of neighborhood standards." "It's undeveloped land," I interrupted. "There's nothing here but dirt, a camper, and a foundation for my house." She glanced at the empty space behind me. "Look, I'll file the report, but homeowner association disputes are civil matters. If they take legal action, you'll need to settle it in court." "That's exactly what they want," I muttered, "to drain me in legal fees until I give up." Officer Lacey gave me a look that almost seemed sympathetic. "You might want to consider speaking to a lawyer. I'll leave it at that." As she left, I spotted movement near the edge of my property. 3 figures standing by the road, watching. I recognized one immediately. Karen Wilson, 54, blonde, always in a floral blouse like some kind of suburban warlord, the self-appointed enforcer of the Homeowner Association. She smiled as I locked eyes with her, then whispered something to the 2 men beside her. One of them, a broad-shouldered guy in a suit, made a quick phone call. Within minutes, a tow truck pulled up in front of my property. I stormed towards them. "What the hell is this?" Karen smirked. "You've been given multiple warnings. That camper is an unauthorized structure. As per Homeowner Association regulations, I don't belong to the Homeowner Association." She tilted her head. "Oh, but this land does. It was annexed into the community last year. Didn't you read the revised covenants?" My stomach twisted. "I bought it from the county, which sold it with the understanding that it's under Homeowner Association governance," she said, pulling out a stack of papers. "You have 2 options, Mr. Grayson. Pay the fines and comply with Homeowner Association rules, or sell the land and walk away." I clenched my jaw. "Not happening. Then I suggest you lawyer up." She nodded at the tow truck. "Move that camper, boys." I reached for my phone to call my attorney, but before I could dial, Karen leaned in close. "You should know something about this neighborhood," she murmured. "People who fight the Homeowner Association don't last long." A chill crawled up my spine as I watched my camper get towed away. The battle had just begun. That night, I stayed up researching Homeowner Association laws, combing through every case I could find about unauthorized annexation. There were loopholes, but the legal fees to fight them were astronomical. I was barely scraping by after buying this land and investing in its development. The last thing I needed was a prolonged legal battle, but if I rolled over now, I'd lose everything. The next morning, I drove down to the county office looking for any document that could disprove their claim. The clerk, a tired-looking man named Roger, tapped at his keyboard as I handed him my deed. "Homeowner Association's been causing a lot of trouble lately," he muttered. "You're not the first person they've tried to push out." That set off alarm bells in my head. "Wait, this has happened before?" Roger nodded, lowering his voice. "Yeah, a guy last year. Same situation. Bought land from the county, Homeowner Association moved in, started throwing lawsuits at him until he caved." "Where is he now?" I asked. Roger hesitated. "Sold his land and left town. Nobody's heard from him since." My grip tightened on the edge of the counter. This wasn't just about some overzealous homeowner association. This was a racket. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice crackled through the line. "Walk away, Mr. Grayson, before it's too late." I glanced around, my pulse spiking. Someone was watching me, and they wanted me gone. The morning after the anonymous call, I barely slept. Every creak in the house had me on edge. The weight of what I had stumbled into was pressing on my chest like a concrete slab. I kept replaying Roger's words in my head. This had happened before, and the last guy who fought the Homeowner Association disappeared. I drove back to the county office as soon as it opened. Roger looked surprised to see me again. "You don't waste time, do you?" he muttered, typing something into his computer. "What are you looking for?" "Everything on the Homeowner Association's expansion," I said, placing my palms on the counter. "If they annexed my land, there had to be a legal process. I need to see the paperwork." Roger sighed, glancing over his shoulder before leaning in. "Most of that stuff isn't easily accessible. The Homeowner Association has friends in the records department. Things have a way of getting lost." "I don't care," I said. "There has to be something." He tapped at his keyboard for a few more minutes before he frowned. "Well, that's odd. The annexation request was filed, but there's no record of approval from the county." He turned the screen towards me. "According to this, your land was never legally transferred into the Homeowner Association's jurisdiction." A cold thrill ran through me. "Which means their claims are completely bogus." "That's the idea," Roger said, rubbing his temples. "But proving it in court won't be easy. They've had time to fabricate backup documents." I took a deep breath. "If I can get this in writing, it's a start." Roger nodded and printed the file. "Be careful. If they know you have this, they'll try to make it disappear." I thanked him and tucked the document into my jacket before heading out. The moment I stepped into the parking lot, I felt eyes on me. A black SUV sat idling near the exit. The windows were tinted, but I could tell someone inside was watching me. I walked to my truck, keeping my pace steady, then peeled out of the lot before they had a chance to follow. As I drove back to my property, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I ignored it. A few minutes later, a text came through. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." My hands tightened on the wheel. They were trying to scare me. It wasn't going to work. When I pulled up to my land, my blood ran cold. My camper was gone. The empty space where it had stood felt like a gaping wound. I jumped out of the truck, scanning the area. The foundation I had poured for my house was still there, but all my tools, materials, and equipment had vanished. A bright red notice was staked into the dirt. Property in violation of Homeowner Association regulations. Unauthorized structures removed. Karen Wilson was standing near the edge of the property, arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. "Mr. Grayson," she called, "I warned you." I stormed towards her. "Where the hell is my camper?" She raised an eyebrow. "Repossessed, per Homeowner Association ordinance. It was an illegal structure." "I don't belong to your damn Homeowner Association. You had no right." "The community board disagrees," she said, unfazed. "You have 24 hours to vacate before further action is taken." I clenched my fists. "You mean before you have someone break into my property again?" "Oh, don't be dramatic," she scoffed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just sell the land, take the payout, and leave. It would be best for everyone." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Who's paying you to do this?" For the first time, her smirk faltered. Just a flicker of hesitation before she recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is simply community enforcement." I laughed bitterly. "Right. Because all Homeowner Association leaders drive brand new Mercedes and have lawyers on speed dial." Her eyes narrowed. "I'd watch your tone, Mr. Grayson." "And I'd watch your back," I shot back, "and because this isn't over." I turned and stormed to my truck, but before I got inside, I noticed something glinting in the dirt near where my camper had been. I bent down and picked it up. A key. Not one of mine. It looked like a house key, but old, worn down from years of use. Karen's voice floated over the wind. I'd let it go if I were you. I pocketed the key and climbed into my truck. Let it go? Not a chance. If the Homeowner Association was willing to break the law to take my land, then there was more to this than a simple dispute. And I was going to find out exactly what they were hiding. The key burned a hole in my pocket as I drove into town. I couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something the Homeowner Association didn't want me to find. But before I could start solving that mystery, I needed answers about my stolen camper, and I had a good idea of where to start looking. I pulled into the county impound lot, my jaw tightening as I spotted my camper behind the chain-link fence. A security guard stood at the entrance, arms crossed. "Help you?" he asked, eyes flicking to my truck. I handed him my paperwork. "That's my camper. It was taken illegally. I'm here to get it back." He barely looked at the papers before shaking his head. "Says here it was removed due to an Homeowner Association violation." "I'm not part of the Homeowner Association. That land isn't under their jurisdiction." He gave me a flat look. "Not my problem. If you have an issue, take it up with them. Until then, you're looking at a storage fee of $500, plus towing." I clenched my fists. They wanted to bleed me dry, keep me tangled in legal fees and bureaucracy until I gave up. I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. Instead of arguing, I took a deep breath and backed off. Fine. I'll take it up with the county. I got back in my truck and drove straight to Roger at the county office. When I explained what happened, he let out a long breath, shaking his head. "This is getting out of hand. I pulled the annexation records yesterday. There's no proof your land was ever properly absorbed by the Homeowner Association. Legally, they have no claim over you." "Then why are they still getting away with this?" I asked, voice tight. "They stole my property, they've harassed me, they've broken into my land, and now they're holding my camper hostage?" Roger grimaced. "Because they're backed by people with money. Lawyers, city officials, real estate developers. They've been pulling stunts like this for years, but they've never pushed this far before." "Which means they're desperate," I said. "They need my land for something." Roger hesitated, then pulled up another record. "You might be onto something. Look at this." He turned his monitor towards me. It was a zoning request. "They've been trying to rezone the area for a major commercial development. Your land is in the middle of it. If they don't get it, the whole project falls apart." A cold realization settled over me. So that's why they're playing dirty. They can't afford to let me win. Roger nodded. "And if you fight them in court, they'll drag it out for years. That's how they operate. You need proof that they're operating illegally." I thought about the key in my pocket. "I think I have something. I just need to figure out what it unlocks." As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I answered it, expecting another threat. Instead, a hushed voice whispered, "Meet me at the old train depot at midnight. Come alone." The line went dead. My heart pounded. This was either a trap or a break in the case. Either way, I wasn't about to back down now. That night, I parked my truck a block away from the depot and walked the rest of the way, staying in the shadows. The abandoned train depot loomed ahead, rusted metal glinting under the streetlights. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and old grease. I scanned the area, my pulse racing. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the occasional squeak of a shifting metal beam. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, face hidden beneath a hood. "You came." The voice was low, cautious. I took a step forward. "Who are you?" "Someone who used to be in your position," they said. "You're not the first person the Homeowner Association has tried to run out, and you won't be the last." I narrowed my eyes. Why are they so desperate for my land? What's really going on? The hooded figure hesitated before tossing something at my feet. It was a folder, thick with documents. "Read that, then you'll understand." I bent down and picked it up. The papers inside were old, some yellowed with age. Deeds, financial reports, records of property transfers, many of them linked to my land. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A ledger detailing payments made to various officials over the years. Bribes. The Homeowner Association had been greasing palms to seize land illegally for decades. I looked back up, but the figure was already backing away. "Be careful," they warned. "You're digging into something dangerous." "Who are you?" I called after them. They hesitated, then muttered, "Someone who lost everything to them. Don't let them take your land, too." Then they disappeared into the night. I stood there, gripping the folder tightly. My suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't just about my land. This was bigger, deeper, and now I had proof. But if the Homeowner Association knew I had it, they'd stop at nothing to silence me. I needed to plan my next move, and I needed to do it fast. I drove home, gripping the folder like it was the most valuable thing I had ever owned, because right now, it was. The contents inside weren't just proof that the Homeowner Association was acting illegally. They were a smoking gun. Names, dates, financial transactions, property seizures that were never legally processed. The farther I drove, the more I thought about the hooded figure's words. "You're digging into something dangerous." They weren't wrong. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was organized fraud, corruption, and intimidation on a level I hadn't expected. And now that I had proof, I knew they weren't going to stop at legal threats. When I pulled onto my property, I noticed something was off immediately. My truck's headlights swept over the foundation of my future home, and my gut twisted. Someone had been here. My tools, my remaining supplies, even the stakes marking where I planned to build. It was all gone. Instead, another bright red Homeowner Association violation notice was stabbed into the dirt. I slammed my door and ripped the paper off the stake. Final notice: non-compliance will result in further enforcement action. The wind howled through the empty space where my materials used to be, but I wasn't just hearing the wind. I was being watched. I turned sharply, scanning the tree line. Shadows moved, figures lingered just out of reach. My pulse spiked, and I tightened my grip on the folder. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. If they wanted me scared, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I stormed into my house, locked the door, and sat at the kitchen table spreading the documents out in front of me. The more I read, the angrier I became. Not only had the Homeowner Association been illegally seizing land, but they had been doing it for decades. The payments to city officials stretched back nearly 20 years. At least 3 local judges had been bribed to rule in their favor. One name stood out more than the rest: Howard Linford. I recognized it immediately. Linford wasn't just an Homeowner Association official. He was the head of the Zoning Commission, the same man who had signed off on my land supposedly falling under their control. I pulled out my phone and started dialing Roger. Before I could hit call, my porch lights flickered. Then they went out completely. My stomach dropped. A second later, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A familiar voice came through, calm but firm. "You don't understand what you found. Walk away, Grayson." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Who is this?" "Someone who's giving you a final warning. Drop this, or you'll regret it." "Or what? You'll keep calling the cops on me? Steal more of my property?" I forced a laugh. "You're running out of tricks." The line went silent for a second. Then the voice dropped lower. "This isn't a trick. You need to disappear, Grayson, because if you don't, we'll make you." The call cut off. My hands trembled slightly as I put the phone down. I had no doubts anymore. This was bigger than just a greedy Homeowner Association. This was a well-oiled machine of corruption, one that had no problem destroying anyone in its way. I exhaled sharply and forced myself to think rationally. I had 2 choices: give in and walk away, or fight. And if I was going to fight, I needed allies. The first person that came to mind was Roger, but I wasn't sure how much power he really had. Then I thought about the journalist, Sarah Bailey. If anyone could help me blow this open, it would be her. I didn't have her number, but I knew where she worked. I grabbed the folder and got back into my truck. I didn't have time to waste. If they were making threats, that meant they were getting desperate. As I pulled out of my driveway, I saw the black SUV again, sitting at the end of the road with its headlights off. I didn't stop. I didn't let them see me hesitate. I just kept driving. The storm was coming, and I was going to make sure I was ready for it. I didn't slow down as I left my property behind. The black SUV was still there, watching, waiting, but I wasn't going to give them a reason to act just yet. They wanted me scared. They wanted me paranoid enough to slip up, but I wasn't about to make it that easy for them. I had one goal: get to Sarah Bailey and give her the evidence before they could make their next move. The drive to the small newspaper office took longer than I expected. The roads were empty, the night pressing in around me like a second skin. Every so often, I checked my mirrors, but the SUV never followed. That should have given me relief, but instead, it left me feeling worse. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting. When I pulled into the parking lot, the building looked dark, but a single light shone from the second-floor window. That was a good sign. I grabbed the folder and made my way up the narrow stairs. The door was unlocked. Another good sign. Either Sarah was expecting someone or she just didn't think anyone had a reason to break into a failing newspaper. She was sitting at her desk, typing furiously, but she looked up the second I entered. "Grayson?" I nodded and shut the door behind me. "I need your help." Her eyes flicked to the folder in my hands, then back to my face. "I figured this might happen." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Talk." I dropped the folder onto her desk instead. "Everything you need to take the Homeowner Association down is in here. Payments to city officials, fake annexations, people they forced out of their homes." She flipped through the first few pages, her brow furrowing deeper with each one. "Jesus, this is worse than I thought. Where did you get this?" "Someone who lost everything to them. I don't know their name, but they made it clear that if I kept digging, I'd end up just like them." She set the folder down. "And you're trusting me with this because you're the only one left who isn't on their payroll," I said. "You've written about Homeowner Association corruption before. You're the only one who might actually be able to do something with this." She leaned back in her chair, thinking. Then she pulled open a desk drawer and grabbed a recorder. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." For the next hour, I did just that. I told her about the fake violations, the police harassment, the threats. I told her about the night my camper was taken, about the warning calls, about the SUV that followed me everywhere I went. By the time I finished, she looked pale. "They're not just trying to take your land," she muttered. "They're trying to erase you. If you disappear, there's no case, no records, just another name on a list." "That's why we need to act fast," I said. "If we go public with this now, before they realize what's happening, they won't have time to cover their tracks." She exhaled sharply, then nodded. "I'll run the story, but I need more than just documents. I need witnesses. I might know someone," I said. "A guy at the county office named Roger. He's been helping me dig into this." She grabbed her phone. "Give me his number. If we can get him on record, this is airtight." I hesitated. Roger had already risked enough by giving me the annexation records. If they got wind that he was talking, he'd be in just as much danger as me. But, at this point, I didn't have a choice. I gave her the number. She dialed immediately. It rang once, twice, then a third time before someone picked up. "Hello?" Roger's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Roger, it's Sarah Bailey. I need you to talk on record about the Homeowner Association's illegal activity." Silence, then a sharp inhale. "I can't do that. Roger, if you don't—" "You don't get it," he hissed. "They know Sarah. They know I helped him. They've been watching me all night. If I talk, I'm dead." The line went dead. Sarah and I stared at each other, the weight of his words settling in the air between us. If Roger was being watched, that meant we didn't have much time. "We have to go public now," I said, "before they come for me next." She nodded. "I'll write it up tonight. First thing in the morning, we publish." I stood, my hands balling into fists. "I need to get back to my property." "Grayson, that's a bad idea. If they know you're onto them—" "They already know," I said, "and if they're coming for me, I'd rather be on my own ground when they do." I left before she could argue, heart pounding as I drove back home. I kept expecting the SUV to be there, to be waiting, but the road was eerily empty. When I pulled up to my property, I turned off my truck and sat in the silence, waiting, listening. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of my land, watching. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, my porch lights flickered. Then they went out completely. A message, a warning, and then I heard the first footstep behind me.